Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another Eckerson Group webinar. Really excited about the topic today, the cold, hard reality of selling data. 7 pitfalls you need to avoid. A lot of juicy information that you'll receive in the next hour or so. And like all of our webinars, we want to bring you into the conversation. So please make heavy, ample use of the chat to put your thoughts, your comments, and your questions in there. And we will stop periodically and scan the chat and bring you or your comments into the session. So let's get on with it. Very, very pleased today to have Michael Hejtmanek as our guest speaker. Michael is VP of Data Consulting at New Data. New Data is one of Eckerson Group's partners. They specialize in data monetization. As you will see, Michael has an enormous amount of expertise and knowledge, as does his company, on this topic. So you're going to hear a distilled version of everything you need to know to monetize your data and everything you need to avoid doing. Just a little bit about Eckerson Group. If you don't know us, we're a boutique consulting firm that helps commercial and nonprofit organizations get more value from their data. Unlike most consulting firms, we don't do a lot of implementation, although we can, but we specialize in delivering actionable data strategies, roadmaps, and governance plans. And you can see some of our clients here, both large, small, brand name, not brand name, US, non-US. So we span the gamut. So with that, I'd like to bring in Michael to kick us off and transfer his knowledge about data monetization to all of us. Go ahead, Michael.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. Welcome, everybody, and glad to be here. So start you off by telling you a little bit about New Data. So my name is Michael Hejtmanek. I run the consulting group at New Data. My background, I come from a very technical background, working for Oracle on their ERP systems and CRM systems for years, building those out, and then joining a handful of data and technology companies after that, and leading to running my own software company and exiting that, and then building a distribution business, consumer electronics distribution business. So I have been on both sides of both the technology consumer and the technology provider. And New Data is a data advisory service. The best way to think about New Data, or an easy way to think about New Data, is that we're like the Gartner Group of data. So we don't research enterprise software products, but instead we research data products. We host events that brings together a community of data buyers and data sellers, and we provide research, a library of research reports about data sets, over 8,000 data sets. And our reach is far. So we have offices in London, New York, and Shanghai, and we work with the largest data buyers in the world. Most of those largest data buyers in the world are financial data buyers. And so those data consumers are concentrated and consume tremendous amounts of data, but it's also corporates and consultancies that we work with to help them find the best data quickly and evaluate how to compare it to the peer data sets or the competitor data sets, and get it on board and into their system. So the company's about 80 people with a research team of 30 that maintains relationships with data providers and understands everything that they need to know about those data sets. And there's also a data provider relationship team of about 10 people that manages those 3,000 accounts and thinks about those data providers. We never take a commission or a rev share or compensated in any way by a data provider when their data is purchased by one of our data buyers. We are a fee-based neutral service where we get paid by data buyers. They pay us an annual subscription fee, and they get access to all of our research. And the only commercial relationship with a data buyer is that they can buy a table at one of our events. So they pay us a couple $1,000 to access our event and buy a table and put their brochures on it. So the fact that we do all this research for the data buyers puts us into an interesting position to know the market. And that's where the consulting team comes in. We know what data is relevant. We know what the competitive landscape is for that data. And so companies approach us all the time to ask us, what's their data worth? Can I bring it to market? What's going to be the challenge? What should I do? And so we have a data monetization consulting practice that really takes all of our knowledge from our core business and applies it to new entrants to the market, or helps existing entrants to optimize their data products. So that's a sort of new data in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think after that, it would be safe to say that there's probably no other or few other companies that have their finger on the pulse of commercial data products than new data. That's my take anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the next slide and you can talk about the dream.
So setting the stage for this webinar, it's sort of starts off with that. Why is everyone so eager to monetize their data? And there is this feeling that we're told all the time by private equity investors, by board members at companies, and by CEOs and C-suite executives that data comes up, and the value of data comes up in every single board meeting. It is a strategic C-suite level, board level topic. And so it's there all the time, but only 3% of corporations are actually selling their data to third parties at this time. So I think Wayne in his marketing material on LinkedIn for this webinar talked about Barbara Wixom, and Barb Wixom's book about data monetization is really a critical thing. She breaks down data monetization into three pieces. The sort of use data better to improve your operations, the second to build products that delight your customers using data, and the third is to actually externally sell data. So what I'm here talking about today is really that third piece, only that to taking the data and selling it to third parties. And that's what I mean when I say only less than 3% of corporate data is available for sale. So, at first glance, tech companies, especially, or SaaS companies, especially fintech companies, they believe that they have data that they can turn into revenue. They can spin that yarn into gold. And in many cases, they're correct. The data may be great, but you've really got to dig in. And that's what we're going to do by covering these 7 pitfalls, is dig into what do you need to know, or what do you need to consider before you take the leap. And then as you take the leap, what are the things that could be the problems, and how do you mitigate those problems? So, you got to dig in deep to understand if it's going to work out for you, and you got to go in with your eyes open.
All right, well, let's dig a little deeper here and go to the next slide.
So the pitfalls that we're going to discuss are outlined in that bulleted list. And sometimes it's that the data is just no good, like the cartoon says, and sometimes it's just too common. Sometimes it's just too hard to clean up, and some of it is irrelevant to all but 1% of a potential buyer population. But if you have data that is valuable, and that you can see there's value to external partners, and people are approaching you, external parties are approaching you and saying, hey, can I access your data? Or another thing that I think we're publishing on LinkedIn today is about web scraping. If you have a web property and it's being scraped like crazy, well, that's a pretty strong indicator that you have some valuable data to third parties. But the biggest problem isn't the value. The biggest problem, well, the starting point is the value. But once you get past that, we can assess that value, whether that data is valuable to someone else in 10 minutes on the phone with you, asking you about 10 different questions about your data. What type of data is it? What's the panel size? What kind of history do you have? What's the schema look like? What's the geographic coverage? These things are pretty quick to understand if there's some seed of value there. But then after another 10 questions, we start to get into more certainty around whether the data could be packaged and sold. And that's where we get into sort of regulatory compliance issues, what data rights you have, and what's happening at your organization. So the biggest problem, or the biggest hurdle that we experience, and the thing we do a multiple phased approach to selling data monetization consulting. And after the first phase, there's a decision point where the project can be canceled. And a lot of projects get canceled because of this big problem. And the big problem is your organization ready to sell data? Do you have the mindset? Do you have the policies? And do you have the executive buy-in? And it's not about the chief data officer having buy-in. It's not about the chief revenue officer having buy-in. It's got to be at the CEO level, and the board have to buy into the idea of selling data.
Okay, so I had a question that has come up in discussions with some of my clients, which is before you can even consider monetizing your data commercially, do you need to have your internal data completely shipshape? In other words, do you need to do your internal blocking and tackling first before you even start considering monetizing that for external consumption?
That's a great question. So if if you follow a data maturity model scale, you can't be at the bottom of the scale. You have to have some organization. You don't need to be at a sort of level 5. It's a strategic, it's a strategic asset, but the the DCMM or DMM that I think of is a 5 level scale. And if you're in the middle at the average, where you've got your controls in place, you've got some governance in place, you understand what you've got, then you can think about starting to sell data. It is interesting to point out that some of the projects that we work on, even with very large organizations, the act of selling data sort of forces their hand and forces these programs along. So when a chief data officer is having trouble getting buy-in, and then all of a sudden the CEO wants to think about selling data, that gives the chief data officer so much ammunition to go, okay, well, now we actually need to do some of these hard things that we've been putting off around restructuring the data, improving data quality, understanding what we've got, how we've got it, and how accurate it is. And so it can be a driving force to actually push these projects along.
Another question I get too is, okay, so we have some internal data products. Do those translate to external data products? Or because we productized internal data, are we better positioned to externalize that data?
Yeah, once an organization starts thinking about data as a data product, that's another great step in the right direction, because you're formalizing your relationship with data and thinking about it through the lens of a data contract, and basically creating an SLA for what this data means, and how it should be treated and organized. And so having data products internally certainly helps, but it's not the end game. And one of the things that we actually have two live engagements right now. I won't mention them by name or anything, and I don't know if they're on this call, but we have two live consulting projects right now where both parties have said, oh, we map all of our product data or all of our transaction data to certain categories of products. And the question the consultant asked was, well, are you using any standard industry classification system? And they said, no, we invent the classification system, but it's pretty good. It's pretty aligned. It makes sense. And you can look at it and it makes sense. And then the consultant asked, well, do they ever change it? Do you ever change it? And they said, oh yeah, well, we change it to serve our own business needs. So they have a data product. They have rules around how to treat that data product. But could you imagine if you're a third party buying this data product and you're analyzing this data and it's got categories attached to it in the schema, and all of a sudden those categories just change randomly one day? That's not a great way to treat a data product. So internally it works great, but externally it doesn't work.
Yeah, so that probably goes to say that it doesn't neatly translate to take an internal data product and externalize it. A lot of things have to happen before you can
Certainly,
commercialize.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's certainly helpful, though. It does help structure the
Yeah.
organization.
All right. One question from Jim. Are there types of data products that are easier to monetize?
Well, it depends on what day it is. So we have if we just looked at financial buyers of data, or in this market, and one only has to look at any headline in any news site to see that supply chain is the main issue. The impact of tariffs on manufacturing and availability of products and pricing. And so right now it's very easy to sell that data, and people are looking for more and more granular insights into that type of data. But there are certain hot areas of data. There is consumer transaction data is always very interesting. So anything that can provide granular or more timely insights into consumer behavior with data sets such as consumer transaction or footfall data, talking about who's going into what store or what type of point of interest. Those sorts of data sets are always very common, or always very in demand. But at the same time, those data sets, those data areas are very crowded. And so you have to have something really unique to stand out in those data areas. There are other extensions where people are moving into further additional geographies. We're seeing a huge thrust of success with data providers that have global coverage. So it used to be, and I think I had this on a slide, that 70% of the data market is the USA. And now the trend that we saw in our research from 2024 was that data providers that have global coverage are becoming more and more and more important. So there's no easy answer, I'm sorry, but there are a lot of different factors.
Yeah, that was great guidance. So thank you, Jim, from our audience for that question. And I encourage all of you in the audience, if you have thoughts or questions, comments, just put them in the chat and we'll bring them up. So let's move on to the next slide, pitfall number 1. So we've kind of given you the overview. Now we're going to dive into some of these issues in a little more detail.
Yeah. Assuming your data is valuable. So kind of goes back to the question Jim just asked. So you have to look at the market at any time and understand what the demand is for the data. So we see all the time that companies assume that their data has a tremendous amount of value because within the lens that they have in their industry, it has tremendous value. It has tremendous value to them. It has tremendous value to their partners, but it may not have value to third parties. And even in data sets that aren't coming from internal corporate exhaust data, just data that's not just being generated as a part of operating your company. There's a data provider that we just spoke to last week that has geopolitical risk data and can very accurately predict. They have a model. They can tell you within 20 days whether China will be invading Taiwan or taking over Taiwan, and they have very high confidence level in that. They have predicted airline crashes. They can predict any military activity. You would think that would be very important to someone studying macroeconomic trends or with a multinational business, but actually it doesn't have much demand. It unfortunately really doesn't have much demand in the market. There's a few major macro funds that buy that, but they buy that and they buy 1,000 other data sets. So we don't know how important it is to them. So it's the assuming your data is valuable is one of the things. And that a lot of these a lot of the points, and there's a lot of text on this slide, sorry about that, but it really comes down to that what buyers want checklist. Is it unique? Is it valuable to me? Is it easy to use? Is it add to something I'm already doing or some analysis that I'm already performing? And very important, that's often overlooked, is can I trust this data provider? Are they consistent? Are they reliable? Is there going to be some compliance headache that comes up down the road where I'm going to get in trouble and this data set's going to disappear? So not only am I going to get in legal trouble, but I'm also going to my process is going to get interrupted. Bottom line is you have to understand what the market wants. So not building the wrong product and not bringing the wrong product to market. You really have one shot there.
Yeah. So that example you gave of the macroeconomic risk, which I can't believe the government doesn't want that data, but that doesn't sound like something that comes out of a corporate exhaust, data exhaust. That sounds like that's been enriched with models and things like that. Is that true for that specific data set?
Yeah.
And would you recommend in most cases that you take your base data and enrich it to make it more valuable?
Yeah, that data set does have a core function within the aviation industry, and therefore they have sort of a core of data, but they augment that core data with 20 or 30 other data sets, bringing them together to come up with really a risk profile or a geopolitical risk assessment for different geographies, and so that one is kind of unique. But if you are sitting on corporate, a corporate data set, and it has some value, a lot of times a data set has a lot more value when it's added to another type of data. So a good the easiest example to understand would be something like a shipping and logistics system that tells you latitude and longitude. Well, once you can map that to roads and highways and cities and states, then that's one level of enrichment. The next level of enrichment, though, would be map it to points of interest. So I know that you just hit an Amazon distribution center, and then further on, map that to products that may be there, and map those products to ticker symbols that are tradable securities, or parent companies or groups, and so then you have sort of whole levels of, that's kind of the basic enrichment. But a lot of times when we talk to data aggregators, we had one last week that or 2 weeks ago that said something like, I want to create a bouquet of data. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, it's when you take a bunch of flowers and put them together, you get something much more beautiful than the whole. And I thought that was a great analogy and way of thinking about putting different data sets together to create more value.
On that score, are more of the buyers, or excuse me, are more of the sellers the data aggregators or brokers, or are they, regular companies, corporations?
Used to be it was aggregators. So and we still do some advisory work helping companies to take their, for example, point of sale data and understand how valuable it is to an organization like Nielsen or Kantar, and how those companies should be thinking about their data and buying their data. And so there is still, it's kind of a nice model to be able to work with the Nielsen, or even if you're not getting cash out of them, you're getting a give to get out of that, and you can negotiate with them to get certain insights and research in exchange for sharing your data with them. A lot of that still happens, but over the last 3 years, we've seen a ginormous, I almost said, excuse me, a gigantic shift towards direct data sales. So more and more corporations taking the leap and selling data directly to end buyers in the marketplace.
Great. Again, I'd like to remind our audience, if you have a question or comment, send it in. I'm going to ask a question on the compliance, following up on what you mentioned here, but I know one of your pitfalls is compliance. So we'll save it for there. You give us an example of a compliance problem a company might face, but let's keep moving on for time's sake.
Sure.
Okay, pitfall number 2.
Yeah, thinking that data is ready when it's not. This goes back to when we spoke about treating data like a product. That's really helpful to think about that internal product, but the rules that you have for your own internal consumption of that data and your own concept of data product are not really the rules of the market or the rules of an external data buyer. So for your data to be valuable, it's really got to follow the rules of the market and understand the priorities and the important points that an external data buyer will have. So you really have to put yourself in a perspective of that third party when you're looking at that data, and thinking about how it can be consistently delivered, and what the compliance information and compliance profile is. You need to be up to date and up to speed on what's changing in the regulatory landscape, and you need to understand how your data is useful. You need to understand the use cases and be able to explain how your data maps to those use cases, and how it can explain some attribute of the market, some competitive intelligence question, or some investment question. So really understanding that and being able to do the analysis to be able to say, this is what we think it does. This is what we think our data says, and then, of course, having the sort of the basics of having customer support there, and basic service level agreements, and being able to deliver the data consistently, not having a human being send an email with an attached CSV file on Monday morning every week, but really having a formalized structure for data delivery is very important. So there's a lot of sort of productization issues that go around getting your data ready for sale.
Yeah, you're creating a real product. Marketing, sales, operations, legal, et cetera, all those things need to be addressed. We have a question from Paul. We've kind of addressed this. A question might be, how do you engage with data customers to ensure that their data remains valuable? Partly based on experience, it's a dangerous assumption that the value demand is not dynamic. In other words, just because data set's valuable, in 2024 doesn't mean it's still valuable in 2025. Is that true?
That is very true, and part of what we think about is that you're not building a one-off product. I think this is one of my pitfalls at the end. You're not just looking at a single point in time and saying, okay, I'm going to release this data and it's ready for the it's going to stay this way for forever, and I'll just slice it. I'll just cut this out of my system every week and deliver it to my clients, my licensees. And you have to iterate. You have to think about how to get more creative, how to build products that keep value and keep the value going. But there are some things that come and go with trends in the market. During COVID, we saw used car data being extremely valuable due to the supply chain shortages and semiconductor shortages, and used car data was also used during that time as a macro indicator and an inflation indicator. And so that interest is still in used car data is still there, but it's certainly quieted down since COVID. So we had a very big spike in interest in that sort of data during COVID, and there's still demand for that type of data today, but it's not as strong as it was. And similarly, right now we have trade wars being started around the world. And so the supply chain data, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely important now. But there are some staples that have been important and will always be important, and those stable data sets, everything from the priorly mentioned consumer transaction data and location data, satellite data. These things are all the evergreen demand.
Oh, great. So let's move on to the next pitfall. Underestimating internal resistance.
Yeah, I talked about this before when I mentioned the C-suite and what's there, but or what the resistance can be, and how you really need to get the buy-in from the CEO and up. And for most companies, data sales is really uncharted territory. So there's just a tremendous amount of fear and resistance. It's a sort of who's going to move my cheese situation. And you can't brush any of the potential gremlins under the rug, because they will prevent you from being successful, either through getting internal buy-in or by brushing something under the rug. You may be affecting your ecosystem. You may be affecting suppliers or customers in a way that you hadn't anticipated. So you really need to be upfront and transparent all the time. And so a lot of companies will say to us, which of our peers are doing this? Or is my direct competitor, company X doing this? I will do it if they're doing it. And the problem is, less than 3% of corporates are selling data. So you're not going to find those direct competitors, but you can find analogous companies that are doing similar things. As an example, we had a major fintech company that worked in small, medium, SMB space, and it was an opportunity we worked on for a long time at New Data, and our project capture team was super excited because it was a great brand name to bring on, and the data set was going to be a game changer. It was, like many of the things that we work on, if brought to market, this data set would have brought in at least an 8-figure, $10 million plus in the first couple of years of data sales, but it also would have allowed the company to be quoted right next to, every month when you hear the ADP payroll report, you would have heard, and this company's, business report. It was that hot of a data set. And the CDO, the chief data officer, bought in, the chief revenue officer bought in, the chief strategy officer bought in. We assumed it was a horrible thing in a sales process to assume anything. So we assumed it was great, everything was fantastic. But the CEO had a special relationship with one of their key business partners and was concerned that this might disrupt that relationship and just killed the whole thing. And so that internal resistance goes straight to the top and can happen all over. I think another interesting example we had with a giant grocery store chain was that this court whisperers issue. We had a great process going, CEO buy-in, and the investor relations person felt that it was undemocratic to sell data and that data should be made available. And we just be made available to everyone. If it was going to be made available, that investors should have it, that partners should have it. It should be free. And so we tried and failed to convince the IR manager that this was that data can be sold and that can legitimately be monetized. But unfortunately, it was religion. It was a religious war, and we lost. We were unable to convince that person to move on. So she won. The project stopped, and even though their peers were doing it. So there's these internal resistances is something that really, this organizational resistance really needs to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm. Great point. All right, why don't we move on? Pitfall number 4, overlooking legal, privacy, or compliance risks.
Yeah, I think this is, I probably said this already, but this is one of the most important slides, if not the most important slide. So you need to make sure that you know the laws, that you obey the laws, that you obey your terms of service, and most importantly, or as importantly, that you're transparent with your ecosystem. So your customers have to know what they're getting into when they sign up for your service. If you're going to be selling some part of their data, some sort of part of their activity, same for your suppliers. If you're doing anything that's impacting any part of your economic ecosystem for your company, you need to make sure you're clear about that and you're upfront about that. About a year ago, the class action lawsuit against GM OnStar was announced. And on the 1-year anniversary, that class action lawsuit is still going strong. And the problem with that GM movement was that the class started the lawsuit and came to them and said, show us where in the terms of service that our clients agreed to share their data with insurance companies, which caused their insurance rates to go up. They're driving data with insurance companies that cause their insurance rates to go up. And GM was unable to show anywhere in the paperwork where they had explicitly agreed to share their data with insurance companies or with third parties that might impact their insurance rates or any third-party service that they had. In the same month, Kia, the automobile manufacturer Kia, was also served with a similar lawsuit. And Kia quickly showed, this is where it says in our terms of service that this data is going to be shared with third parties and it may impact your insurance rates, and it may, they laid it all out. The Kia lawsuit, it opened and it's still open. The lawsuits don't close, but it's just sitting out there. Nothing's happened since a year ago, whereas the GM lawsuit is moving forward and has had a settlement. GM is not allowed to do this. They have been severely slapped on the wrist by the Federal Trade Commission and had some other penalties related to that lawsuit, and it's still ongoing. And so you have that kind of a nightmare story. And then you have stories like one of our clients that has a B2B procurement data set. And We talked to them about the communication plan. They immediately got their PR team and their corporate communications teams on board. They got their sales teams on board. And we sat and met with them, and we said, okay, you really need to get out in front of this issue. You need to tell these customers that you're going to aggregate, anonymize, and share some of their data. And the marketing officer said, this is fantastic, because we're going to provide them with analysis and insights based on exactly the same data. So as a part of getting access to that analysis and insights, they will explicitly agree to share this data with third parties. That won't really have any impact to them, because it won't be able to be tied back to their companies. They'll understand it because they're actually seeing and using basically the same tool that the third parties will be using. And that was just a magical response from an organization that just stepped up and said, yeah, we're going to face this. We have no problem. We have nothing to hide here. And that's really a critical strategy to use to move forward.
So does that mean, like your quote at the top there, that if you anonymize data, you're fine? You're always going to succeed?
No, that's sort of a lot. That's sort of I should have put there. Those are sort of those are fake truths. Those are the things that people we hear. It's anonymous, so it's fine. There's another organization that had a lawsuit, DTCC. It's a financial market infrastructure tech provider that clears trades, settles trades, equities markets, or actually any securities markets trades, and their equities product. They have 8 data products. They have a $2 billion plus business doing their core business, and a tiny data business that's done sort of to help lubricate the market and to keep their name in marketing, give them marketing benefits. And their equities product, someone wrote a blog post saying, oh, I can reverse engineer this equities and de-anonymize and re-identify all of the users in here. The person actually they brought it through an audit process, and the person's theory was actually false, but they pulled that data product out of the market. They really looked towards, how do we get this data out? It's anonymized. Someone said they can re-anonymize it, but let's protect our reputation. Let's protect our core. Let's pull that data off the data product off the market and slowly reintroduce that to the market. And that was another sort of upstanding citizen move. And when we saw that, we just said, this is the right way to do it. Take the cautious approach, protect your core business. So it's anonymized. We're fine. That is not a truth. That's a sort of that's a fable. And it's our data. Of course we can use it. Well, where did it come from? What's the provenance of that data? How is it derived? And just because someone went to your website and filled out a form doesn't mean it's your data. It depends on what those terms of service were, and that has to be very carefully analyzed.
So it might be the case that the company's all on board with selling data, but their terms of service would make it a compliance nightmare. So they have to first update their terms of service and get all their customers to buy into that, which could be a pretty elaborate process. Have you seen that happen?
We have gone through that many times.
Okay.
We actually have multiple engagements right now where we're going through that exact process, where the legal work of changing the terms of service and getting the client base signed on to the new terms of service is an onerous activity. So it's good to start these processes early. And
we should have taken a poll at the start about how interested people were in selling data, and take another same poll at the end to see if you've persuaded or dissuaded anybody.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot of work. I mean, it's you just can't throw data out there. There's a lot that has to go with it. I think that's kind of the message that we're hearing.
Yeah.
So I want to remind the audience that if you do have a question or comment, please send it into the chat. We'll address it.
One of the really on that point, one of the really interesting things is that it takes a lot of work to get set up to be able to do this, just like any other product. But once you're there, and once you've got this business unit running, really, if you're talking about corporate exhaust data and you're not doing a tremendous amount of enrichment, your margin is almost 100%. So by adding 5, 10, 15, 50, $100 million of revenue to your top line, it's going straight through to your bottom line, almost straight through to your bottom line. So, well, yes, it is a lot of work, and you have to take it seriously. The reward is also there if you've got the right data.
Cool. All right, let's move on to pitfall number 5, building the wrong product.
Oh yeah. Well, we can read the bullet points there, but I can just tell an example that we had an opportunity come to us where a potential data provider, a data owner with some very interesting luxury goods data, global database of how luxury products were selling in a specific sort of niche venue around the world. And they came to us and wanted to do a data monetization project, and we told them yes, it's going to cost some money. And they said, well, we have somebody else that'll do it for cheaper. And we said, okay, that's great. I always think about my place I bring my car to get fixed. It says we understand the person down the road may do this same service for less money. Only he knows the true value of his services. And so if that's the case and they wanted to go with the cheaper solution, they went with the less expensive solution. And the problem was they couldn't share all of the data. They had to aggregate it into categories. And if we would have found that out, we would have immediately known that's not a valuable data set. First of all, it's a niche channel through retail. Sure, it's global, but there are other global data sets for luxury products. And that niche, plus having to aggregate it by category and not being able to mention brands, it just would have not added any value. So this competitor told them, go for it. They built out the product. They brought it to market. They spent money trying to sell it, and they fell flat on their face and sold none. And then they came back to us, to New Data, and said, we have no budget. We have no money left over for this, but can you help us fix it? And I don't have a good outcome to share for that, but the basic story, or maybe this sounds like a total blatant sales pitch, but the story is that we try to our interest, our core business, if we think about what our core business is, protecting our core business, it's to bring great data sets to our buy side clients. Data buyers come to us and pay us a lot of money to access our research. And so the success of the consulting team works when we bring great data sets to market. So if we would have been talking to this data provider, we would have talked to them and said, this isn't going to move the needle for your business or for our business. It's just not a match. And so, that one-off consulting fee that we would have gotten, that doesn't help New Data survive. New Data survives because we produce the best insights for data buyers. And if your data is not going to move the needle for you, the data provider, and provide data to the data buyers, then we'll tell you what you can expect before you sign the agreement. And once we finish auditing the data assets, we come up with a 3-year projection of revenue for that data set. And once you see that 3-year projection of revenue, you can cancel the rest of the project. There are companies that say, I need to be able to sell $5 million of data in 3 years. And so they set that hurdle rate. And if we don't meet that hurdle rate, we walk away, and we have done that before. There's no sharpening the pencil to meet the hurdle rate. We abide by that because it's in both of our best interests.
Interesting. All right, another question came in. Every time I see a change in the terms of service, I think, I wonder who they are selling my data to. Is that usually the reason why companies are changing terms of service?
I wish we had Brittany, our compliance officer, on. I'm not quite sure the statistical.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't have an analysis of why the terms of service are frequently changed, but in a lot of cases, terms of service are changed in order to make more use of data. And so that is a very common reason why terms of service are changed. I don't know if it's
I'm
the
sure there are
majority
other
reason.
reasons, given that only 3% of companies actually sell data. So, but I'm assuming that is a driver for a lot of them. So, all right. Well, this is great. Let's keep moving on. Pitfall number, I get 2 more, right? Pitfall number 6, failing to treat data like a product.
Yeah. It's I think that This one comes down to sort of thinking about your reputation and everything you do should be the most important thing that you're doing at that moment. And if you're not, don't half-ass it. You really need to think about your reputation. Your as a data product, if you're not as a data provider, if you're not treating the data like a product and not thinking about that you want to provide the best product possible to the market that you're serving, then it's going to be very difficult to succeed. Honesty, quality, reliability, self-knowledge about what your data is are some of the most important things that you can do for your data. If your data has bias, tell your clients, be upfront. We do new data. We do a gathering once a quarter in different cities around the world. We'll bring together 50 or 75 data buyers and sit down at some swanky restaurant and have dinner and just talk data. And at the last one, someone from a big data buying organization, she said, "Oh, is anyone using this data set?" And it was a very common data set, and everyone at the table raised their hand. And she said, "We found that there's an error in their data a couple of weeks ago." And a couple of people said, "Yeah, we did too. We saw the same issue." Uh, and uh, and she said, "Well, we called them and said, we found this error. What's going on?" And the data provider said, "Oh, yeah, we know about that. We know about that. We're working on fixing it." And all these people are sitting there thinking, "I'm running my business. This is like, there's a lot of money at stake here. If you found an error, tell us about it. Don't just sit on it and think you're going to fix it and then be a hero when you say, 'Oh, there was an error in our data for the last month, but we fixed it. Look at the hero. We're champions.'" That is not the way to run a business. And that data provider got a lot of cancellations that year.
All right, a couple of questions coming in. I have one, which is, what kind of a team do you need to dedicate to, building, delivering, supporting these data products? Like, how many people do you have to hire or dedicate to this process?
Yeah, the answer to that is unfortunately it depends. So at some large multinational corporations, they have existing processes and existing teams that can help. So you can pull resources from the marketing team, you can pull resources from the revenue generation team, and you can pull resources from data engineering to be able to and product management in order to be able to manage all of these different aspects of bringing a data product to market. But at most organizations, as part of what we do is we work on the organizational development and provide org charts through time, both based on time-based triggers and or milestones in commercial milestones, such as you just closed your 5th trial with a client, so now you need to think about hiring a customer support person. And so you start out generally with a team of 2, and the team of 2 consists of a full-time product person that really is the expert on the product, and maybe a part-time salesperson, but better to have a full-time salesperson. And then you build out from there based on how the sales grow.
I also assume you're going to need some technical people to build up enrich the data and then post it or deliver it, whatever mechanism is used.
Yeah, the data engineering and platforms are kind of a different story or a different angle. We have in almost all cases companies that approach us and successfully work with us on a data monetization project. They have the data engineering capabilities because they have that data maturity level that's consistent with their ability to bring data to market. And so the data engineering activities don't consume or don't have a resource requirement or additional resource requirement in most cases. That said, I know that one of my team members on this call is waiting for answers from the data engineering team at one of our newer clients, and they're going back and forth on how does that panel break down and what are the details of that. And the data engineering team saying, "Well, we can't get to that today." So there's always a bottleneck, but for the most part, the product management or product expert and the sales effort are the resources that really need to be dedicated.
Okay. One comment slash question. There's a lot of free applications out there whose business models depend on selling data. So they have to do it. I guess the question is, who do they sell it through? Can the right broker increase revenue by aggregating it with data from other sources? I don't know if those are folks that you've worked with, as these free SaaS apps or freemium model type businesses.
I mean, there are sponsors at our events that sell app data, app usage data, and almost every app on my phone is selling my data. And the app developers integrate an SDK. They get paid by the data provider that builds that SDK, and that SDK collects your usage data of different apps, consolidates it, anonymizes it, and then sells it on to third parties. This is a very, very common practice. It's to the extent of I met there's a ride sharing. So we're in New York City. There's a ride sharing service in New York City that some of the founders went to business school with me, and when I met them, the first thing out of the first question that we talked about is, they said, what are you doing with all the data about the ridership of this ride sharing, this bike sharing platform? And they said nothing. I said, oh, you should be selling that. Obviously, all your competitors are selling that data. You should package that stuff up and sell it. It is common everywhere. I actually tried to find there's a New Yorker cartoon about something like that, selling my own data, and I couldn't find it before this webinar. But that's something, someone sitting on the sidewalk with a table and a whole bunch of stuff on the table saying selling my own data. Everyone's selling your data. Yeah. I am very controversial in that I say I find it infuriating that I have to accept cookies on every single website, especially in Europe. It's absolutely infuriating, because if you think cookies is how they get you, no, not at all.
Here's the cartoon, I think, right?
Oh, is that the one? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did have it. Okay, great. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, where are we here? We did that one. So on to pitfall number 7. Treating monetization as a one-off project.
Yeah, this is a balancing act, but the monetization has to be a product where you think about, you start off, you have an ideal customer profile, you go after that target market, you bring that product to market, and then you're pulled in different directions. You're going to get pulled in a million bright shiny objects are going to be thrown in front of you, and you have to think strategically about how to how to handle all those requests. Are they in line? Is it a part of a product? Is it a part of a theme or a trend? And so it's all about listening to clients, because your interests are aligned. And so you have to sort of think through what feedback am I getting about my product? How am I going to iterate that product without ending up with 1,000 different versions of it, servicing one client each, and how am I going to be consistent and reliable? And it's I try to think of a better way to say this, but I've yet to come up with a better way of saying this. Is that boring wins? The clients that we see succeed are the ones that go like, okay, this is what I do. This is my core. I'm going to move at a glacial speed towards changing that, but I'm going to keep innovating. But the innovation is going to be on my timeline, and it's going to be when things make sense to innovate. Sometimes we see success when someone's gets through, a pile of money gets thrown at them to do something custom, and then it does make sense. But in most cases, it's boring wins, and build the product and innovate the product on a timeline that makes sense to think about how to build value for a client base, and how to grow that client base, and how to address a real problem in a real market. It's hard to balance, and I can't really share any examples without getting into real detailed examples from some of our clients. But I think maybe another thing to mention on this last pitfall is that is something that I didn't put on the slide, that data sales won't save your company. This is something that our chief revenue officer disagrees with me because the chief revenue officer of New Data came from a company where he actually started selling data, and it did save their company. It was a failing fintech, and he managed to turn the data product into something that turned the company around and managed to get them sold. But generally, data sales does not save your company. So if you're struggling and your business is going the wrong direction, focus on fixing the business, not trying to put a Band-Aid on it by selling data.
And we've seen the opposite too, where you have a new company in search of a business, thinking some sort of data sale or data product is going to be the future for them. Right?
Yeah, that's one that we worked on together, where
Yeah.
we really worked on, how can we formulate a strategy for a company that basically can do a lot of different things, and was looking for what business will I build that will result in the highest value for data. And turned out to be a sort of moderate success, and they're implementing the strategies now, and we'll see if that succeeds. But that's kind of normally you go into it knowing exactly what you want to build and what your value proposition is, not coming to us and saying, okay, I want to build something that's going to have really valuable data, tell me what to build.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left, so let's finish up. This is the recap.
Yeah, so I mean, a recap, we covered a lot of ground. Basically, you need to know your data's value. You need to understand the risks, know who your customer is and what they want, and then build the right team and product roadmap. Understand that sales process too. That most data sales happen with trials, and those trials are free trials, and they last 3 months, 6 months. And understand that sales process. And internally, make sure you've got buy-in, make sure you set expectations, everything that chief data officer needs to worry about, you need to worry about when you're thinking about this external monetization of data. And listen to the feedback and sell. I think at I just rambled. I didn't cover any of the 7 pitfalls, but you can read them.
Yeah, no, that was a good summary, but you have some final takeaways here.
Yeah, it's as I said a few minutes ago, the monetization of data can provide a really great, but it's not like it's free. It's not just because you can export some data from SQL Server at night that you've got a data product. You really have to think it through and take it seriously as a real product. And most of these pitfalls that we talked, if not all of them, are preventable. And I think that the most powerful example I shared is that B2B procurement data set, where the whole team, the whole organization, from the chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, chief strategy, they all got together and said, we're going to communicate with our clients and we're going to tell them what we're doing. We're going to face this thing straight on. And you don't have to be a GM OnStar getting sued for data. That is not, those horror stories shouldn't be the norm. And that was just bad management at General Motors. And it's a business model, not a project. It's a mindset too. It's we are a real. It has to be taken really seriously and become a core part of the company.
Right. You have to commit in a big way, wholeheartedly. And I think that's the big takeaway for a lot of companies, is that, oh yeah, we're sitting on some data we think we could sell, but it's a big endeavor. So don't underestimate it. But listen, Michael, this was extremely valuable information you provided. I know our audience got immense value from it. So I want to thank you very much. And also thank our listeners for tuning in. If you have any questions for me or Michael, please send them our way or write to Michael at New Data. What is your email that they can send to?
Do you have the next slide in there still, or I think it's
there
on?
it is.
Is
Michael at
slide?
newdata.co.
Michael at newdata.co or .com, both work.
Yeah. So as we said at the outset, we partner with New Data. They help you develop a monetization strategy, and if you need help getting your data house in order to deliver data products for internal or external consumption, that's where Eckerson Group comes in. So with that, thank you all very much, and we hope you have a great day and rest of your week.
Great stuff. Thanks all.